Hello, Francesca. How are you?
Hi, all good. Thank you.
Hopefully I got your name right. If not, I apologize. So I believe you're the first virtual person who's going to be presenting here.
No, I'm not going to present.
At 9:30.
Hello, microphone testing. Good morning. Good morning to you all.
Are you going to be on camera with us?
Hello. Good morning. Good morning to all. Okay.
Francesca.
Could you raise it? I think it's fine. It's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
I apologize for that. Will you be presenting, Francesca, at some point?
No, I'm not.
You're not presenting. So you're not speaking and you're not presenting.
No, I'm just, not taking and supporting from the back.
Okay. So should I put you back into attendees?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, David. Just checking if you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay, because I am giving some remarks during the session.
Okay, just trying to find you on. You're at about 10:10, 10:15, correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for checking in. If you don't mind, just turning off your camera and
of course.
microphone, and when we get to your time slot, I will ask you to turn your camera on. The prompt on the computer will come on, a Zoom prompt saying you have a green light to open up your camera. Okay. Thank you.
না, ওইটা আমাকে বললো। না, তাই তো আছে এখানে। আচ্ছা, শোনো। Prime Minister, তারপরে এটা পরে হবে, তাই তো? Okay. আচ্ছা।
These things always make us nervous.
I have my bath and get ready. On course, even I took some relaxing, they're also the same result. You're going to put your one, then we'll come back. Yes,
So much going on.
I will. Ready.
Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Honourable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Honourable Eisenhower Mkaka, MP, Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change, Malawi. His Excellency, Mr. Sanjay Verma, Honourable Vice Minister, Ministry of External Affairs, India. Ms. Maimunah Mohd Sharif, Executive Director, UN Habitat. Mr. Ryder, Director General ILO. Ms. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General, Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the UN. Excellencies, colleagues, a very good morning to you all. I am Muhammad Abdul Muhid, Permanent Representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations in New York. On behalf of the co-hosts of the event, I welcome you all to this high-level hybrid event on ensuring safe and affordable housing for all, achieving SDG Target 11.1. I have the honor to moderate this event this morning. Today, we are privileged to have an extraordinary group of eminent persons as our speakers and panelists on this issue of national and global concerns. I believe today's meeting will add great value in our relentless efforts to identify some bold deliverables for advancing our shared goals, objectives, and commitments to advance the SDG 11 and the new urban agenda. Without further ado, I now have the distinct honor to invite Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, Honourable Prime Minister of Bangladesh, to deliver her opening remarks. In her 2 decades of extraordinary leadership as our Prime Minister, Bangladesh has seen many transformative changes. As the daughter of our father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, she is making every effort to fulfill his unfinished dreams. After the brutal assassination of our father of the nation and most of his family members in 1975, Prime Minister Hasina has shown indomitable courage to overcome many daunting challenges, both for herself and the people of Bangladesh. Among many other accomplishments, she has pioneered the flagship Ashrayan project, which you can translate to safe shelter or sustainable housing, with an ambitious goal to ensuring safe housing for all and addressing the issue of homelessness in a comprehensive manner in Bangladesh. You have the honor, Honourable Prime Minister. You have the floor, Honourable Prime Minister. I beg your pardon.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum and very good morning to you all. It is my pleasure to join this side event on sustainable and affordable housing. This is an issue I hold very close to my heart. I strongly believe that a safe and decent shelter is the basic right of every individual. Being a densely populated country of 165 million people, Bangladesh could successfully manage the issue of homelessness. We are providing the landless, homeless people houses with land free of cost. I'm here today to share my experiences of success in building sustainable houses for the underprivileged people across the country. Dear friends, after our independence, Father of the Nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, took initiatives to rehabilitate the landless, homeless, and rootless people, making it a development priority in 1972. Counting on the vision of Father of the Nation, in 1997, we launched a project named Ashrayan, that means housing for landless, homeless people. Not only house, also livelihood. For the last 2 decades, my government put the most sincere effort to ensure free of cost housing for all. Our coverage area is not only the cities, rather than it includes every village, town, district, island, hilly region of the country. On the occasion of birth centenary of the Father of the Nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, this effort is rejuvenated with bigger standings. Just in last 2 years, we have built 200,000 homes with accommodates near about 1 million people. During my premiership of 18 years, we have accommodated 3.5 million homeless people in more than 500,000 of houses. Construction of another 40,000 houses is presently going on. Under this project, each family is getting ownership of the brick-built house of 400 square feet area with 2 bedrooms, 1 long veranda, a kitchen, and a sanitary latrine. We are providing free electricity connections, safe drinking water to every household. We are giving the house and the land with sufficient homestead area free of cost, which is unique in the history of the world. The beneficiaries of these houses are landless, homeless, beggars, day laborers, destitute women, widows, persons with disabilities, elderly people, the victim of domestic violence, ethnic minority, third gender people, leprosy patients, sweepers, and Harijan communities, so-called lower caste. We are addressing the climate victim families too. We have already accommodated 5,000 climate refugees families in 139 multi-story buildings in Cox's Bazar. Excellencies, previously it was a common scenario in Bangladesh that homeless people used to flock to the cities in search of employment and dwelling. But since the introduction of Ashram project, this trend is almost stopped. The people are now self-employed in their own localities. We are following a model of inclusive development. The model ensures a holistic approach to make a rehabilitated person self-reliant and self-dignified with economic and social empowerment. The project ensures an equal share of ownership of the land and house for both husband and wife. If there is any conflict, then wife will get the priority. That I can ensure you. House is the most basic need of every citizen of the country. It creates opportunities for fulfilling other needs. In Bangladesh, we have experienced that a home is not just a place to live. Housing security accelerates persons' economic emancipation and motivates them to live with dignity. Along with the provision of land, houses, we have made successful arrangement in sending children to primary schools. Besides, to deliver primary healthcare, connections have been made with the nearby community clinics. The children or women receives 30 types of medicine free of cost. Homestead gardening, rearing poultry and fish production, including micro and small entrepreneurship activities led by women are in place. These interventions have made an initiative sustainable and eco-friendly. Dear friends, homelessness is indeed a curse. It affects people in both developing and developed countries. Our experience shows it is within our capacity to do something about removing this curse. All our friends and stakeholders gather here can forge a strong partnership to make that happen. The new urban agenda provides us a useful blueprint for moving forward. We must support UN Habitat's work in supporting countries to implement the agenda. Bangladesh will remain engaged with the group of friends here in New York to bring these issues to the forefront. Let us keep working for a world where homelessness becomes a matter of past. I thank you all.
I thank you, Honorable Prime Minister, for your insightful remarks, especially for highlighting some of the most innovative and successful projects in Bangladesh, and for sharing specific ideas and way forward to address the critical need of landless and homeless people, both at national and global levels. I now have the honor to invite Honourable Eisenhower Mkaka MP, Minister of Natural Resources and Climate Change, and the Chair of the Global Coordination Bureau of the LDCs to take the floor. Honourable Minister, you have the floor, please.
Your Excellency, Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. In this last decade of action for sustainable development goals, Malawi and other least developed countries are lagging behind, particularly in the attainment of SDG number 11.1 on ensuring of safe and affordable housing for all. Our meeting today should therefore consider actions to accelerate the attainment of this goal. Before I proceed, allow me to express gratitude to the UN Habitat for convening this meeting and extending an invitation to Malawi to weigh in on challenges, efforts, and opportunities in this regard. Excellencies, safe and affordable housing and eliminating homelessness by 2030 is central to human well-being, as housing is one of the basic necessities of life. In most of the least developed countries, an average of 60% of the urban population lives in slums. These are typically overcrowded areas with limited access to water, sanitation, waste management, healthcare systems, and basic services. In addition, access to information, the internet, and early warning systems. Populations living in this unsafe housing are particularly vulnerable to the adverse climate-induced disasters, making their houses unsafe and unsustainable. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in the past 2 years, the COVID-19 pandemic has, particularly among LDCs, worsened the inadequate access to affordable housing through economic disruption that has pushed millions more into poverty. Amidst this bleak outlook, the recently adopted Doha Program of Action for the LDCs forges a renewed partnership between the LDCs and their development partners in order to chart a course for recovery from the pandemic and its impact, and reset on a pathway to achieving SDG 11.1. As such, the program of action recognizes the challenge of financing sustainable urbanization in LDCs and affirms commitments to strengthen government housing agencies for improved access to land, affordable housing, and basic services for all. Excellencies, in implementing the provisions of the program of action, Malawi has set an ambitious development blueprint, the Malawi 2063, which in part aims to improve human settlements by ensuring that everyone has access to decent and affordable housing. And furthermore, we aim to reduce the proportion of the urban population living in slums and informal settlements from 60 to 10% by the year 2063. We are also empowering our state-owned company, Malawi Housing Corporation, which is responsible for providing housing services to construct more houses that can be occupied by our citizens at affordable rates. We believe this will help accelerate our efforts towards attainment of SDG 11.1 in the remaining years of this decade of action. Furthermore, we have submitted to UN Habitat's Cities Investment Facility a plan to upgrade slums in urban areas in order to improve the living conditions and livelihoods of at least 10,000 low-income and vulnerable households living in 3 main cities of the country. We intend to provide a resilient, affordable housing and tenure security to selected poor and vulnerable households through greenfield development projects. The project will support upgrading of informal settlements in the 3 cities through replanning and provision of basic infrastructure and services. In this regard, we invite co-financing partners as well as direct investors to this project so as to reduce homelessness. As we contemplate how to make homes safe, adequate, accessible, and affordable, let us bear in mind that the number of people becoming homeless is rising every year due to increasing frequency and magnitude of climate-induced disasters. Our steadfastness, therefore, towards this endeavor is of paramount importance. We should further contemplate on how we can establish and harness public-private partnerships, such as the city's investment facility that UN Habitat is coordinating to deal with challenges with access to affordable housing. And we must therefore generate lessons from such existing facilities and best practices of countries like Bangladesh, among other initiatives that may assist us in tackling the safe and affordable housing challenge before us. It is my ardent hope that this meeting will spur not just a discourse, but also the needed action towards accelerated attainment of our aspirations. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank you, Honourable Minister, for your thought-provoking and insightful remarks. I cannot agree more with you that eliminating homelessness by 2030 would be critical to the well-being of the humans as one extremely important necessity in life. And the LDCs need enhanced support from the global community to address this important issue. May I now invite Madam Maimunah Mohd Sharif, Executive Director, UN Habitat, for delivering her keynote address. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Excellencies, ministers, mayors, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor to welcome you together with Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, for this important discussion on ensuring safe and affordable housing for all. Your Excellency, I have been asked to explain what is the mandate of the United Nations Human Settlement Program, or UN Habitat in short. This is reflected in 3 words that you are most familiar with: shelter, houses, and homes. Your presence here today has elevated the mandate and the objective of UN Habitat, which is the provision of shelter, our collective aspiration to ensure that housing is affordable, accessible, and adequate, resilient, and the basis for the right to development, and our determination to transform houses into homes where people live with dignity. This is why the United Nations, working as one UN, is committed to affordable, safe, and adequate housing for all. We believe this is to be a key transformative force that can lead the world to overcome challenges related to poverty, climate change, exclusion, and inequality. Distinguished delegates, conflicts and climate disasters have made the provision of shelter more urgent than ever. COVID-19 and the socio-economic impact have plunged the world's economy into a depression. As noted in UN Habitat's flagship report, Cities and Pandemic, Towards a More Just, Green and Healthy Future, COVID-19 highlighted the necessity to address the pre-existing housing crisis reflected in the increasing unaffordability of adequate housing to a large share of the global urban population. Pre-pandemic data suggested that 80% of cities worldwide do not have affordable housing option, either for rental or for purchase for people on the median income. Further, as we approach COP27 and we mark the 50th anniversary of United Nations Conference on Human Environment, it is critical to recognize how extreme weather events fueled with climate change are intensifying the crisis of affordable housing and homelessness, forcing an estimated 20 million people a year from their homes. Poor and marginalized communities are forced to settle on precarious areas. They are more exposed to rising sea levels, flooding, mudslides, and tsunami, among others. At the same time, the role of housing sector in tackling climate change cannot be ignored, as the buildings and construction sector accounts for 37% of process-related carbon dioxide emission, consume fresh water, energy, and raw material, and generate water effluents and landfill. Investing in green sustainable materials and techniques contribute to the better use of natural resources and promote the circular economy in cities, providing jobs and the livelihood of its citizens. Tackling challenges from COVID-19 pandemic, climate and housing emergencies will then require as highlighted by the UN Secretary General in our common agenda, a renewed social contract underpinned by housing for all as key for the concrete realization of human rights, social inclusions, and protection. And nowhere is this as visible as when we approach homelessness, one of the most evident illustrations of the threat to people's health and life that the lack of adequate housing constitutes. People experiencing homeless, in fact, do not only lose their houses, they are also often uprooted from their family and social connection. They face barriers in accessing health and mental care, as well as education, job opportunities, and dignified living conditions, which fuels the downward spiral of poverty. This is why we believe that tackling homelessness is a precondition for the full realization of human rights, as well as our ability to meet the commitments of Agenda 2030 and to implement the new urban agenda. Last year, the right to housing, adequate housing, was fully recognized by the international community and member states when they passed the resolution on inclusive policies and programs to address homelessness, including in the aftermath of COVID-19, tabled by Algeria, Djibouti, Madagascar, and Senegal on behalf of the African group. The resolution was adopted by consensus at the 76th session of the General Assembly. In that text, homelessness is fully acknowledged as a societal failure, instead laying blame at the individual. The resolution also recognizes that homelessness is a complex issue that requires multi-sectoral and integrated responses, as well as a whole of government and a whole of society approach. This is an important step towards a long-term and systemic approach to address homelessness and depart from intervention focusing on individual behaviors and criminalization. While homelessness is a complex issue, it is solved through a people-centered, housing-led, integrated, preventive, and evidence-based approach. We will hear today experiences that points us in this direction, in particular success story in addressing homelessness for more than 2 decades in Ashrayan project. Your Excellency, Madam Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank once again the government of Bangladesh for initiating this important discussion and co-hosting this event. We count on your support as we continue working in cooperation with UN-DESA to prepare the Secretary General's progress report on inclusive policies to end homelessness. As the United Nations agency mandated to promote socially and environmentally sustainable towns and cities, UN Habitat is committed to support national and local governments to build their capacity to ensure there is adequate shelter during climate emergencies. We are ready to provide normative guidance and technical support to ensure accessible and affordable housing. Finally, with your leadership, Madam Prime Minister, we want to support all leaders to make the transformation of policy into practice as the foundation for resilient local economies that work for all. Together, let us ensure that we are not only build houses, but homes. This is the basis for the right to development. Thank you, and I wish you all an inspiring discussion. Thank you.
I know that this report naturally. Okay, thank you very much. Please, thanks very much.
Could I invite Ms. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, SDG to kindly move to the podium, please, to take a seat there. I thank Madam Executive Director, Human Habitat, for your address, especially for highlighting the importance of transforming the houses into homes, and for the UN to work as one UN to ensure safe and affordable housing for everyone, everywhere, particularly for the marginalized people in the society. Thank you. I would now like to invite His Excellency, Mr. Sanjay Verma, Vice Minister, Ministry of External Affairs, India, to take the floor. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Sheikh Hasina, the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, the Executive Director of UN Habitat, Excellency Maimunah Mohd Sharif, Mr. Guy Ryder, Director ILO, and ASG Maria Francesca DESA. Dignitaries present in the room, namaskar, good morning, Assalamu alaikum. Let me begin by thanking the hosts for this morning's event, our dear neighbor Bangladesh and UN Habitat. Excellencies, homelessness is a symptom of deep-rooted economic and social challenges. Homeless people are often the poorest and the most vulnerable in society. Yet, the issue of access to affordable housing is often not accorded the same level of priority at an international level as the other basic needs. We need to address the structural issues that render people homeless as much as our effort to ensure safe and equitable access to affordable housing. Ensuring equitable access as well as addressing the root causes, both are key for securing a sustainable housing solution for all. A safe, adequate, and affordable housing necessarily contributes towards a better health, education, and economic opportunities. However, there exists a visible gap in access to housing based on rural, urban, socio-economic, and gender considerations. We should be mindful of the clarion call to leave no one behind. I would also like to congratulate the government of Bangladesh for the success of the Ashrayan project, which has provided housing to hundreds and thousands of people. On behalf of the government of India, I extend my best wishes to the success of the program to ensure that no person is left homeless in this, the year of Mujib. Excellencies, while celebrating its 75th year of independence, the Government of India continues to progress where every Indian has a house with all basic amenities. India has been implementing the world's largest affordable housing program for the poor, called the Prime Minister's Housing Scheme for All. The scheme is implemented both in rural and in urban areas. Over 23.5 million houses have been built under this program so far. Giving a fillip to gender equality and to address vulnerabilities faced by women in terms of their right to property, the title of each home under the mission is under the woman head of the household or held co-jointly. The program also facilitates adoption of green, disaster-resistant building materials and construction techniques for ensuring faster and cost-effective construction. To address the COVID-19 pandemic-induced reverse migration of the urban poor, the government launched the Affordable Rental Housing Complex, a sub-scheme under the Prime Minister's Housing Scheme to provide affordable rental housing to urban migrants and poor close to their workplaces. The sub-scheme gives preference to persons belonging to the minorities, widows, working women, persons with disabilities, and other vulnerable people. India has also been helping countries in our neighborhood in their quest for affordable housing, including in the rehabilitation of internally displaced persons in Sri Lanka and Myanmar. International efforts towards SDG 11 have been greatly strengthened in the last few years by the new urban agenda and the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. We look forward to productive process of the midterm review of the Sendai framework next May and an ambitious political declaration. As India endeavors to build a more prosperous and inclusive society, we stand truly committed to achieving a safe, equitable, and sustainable future for all our citizens, and in working with the global community to achieve the SDGs together. Building homes, we believe, is building a future for the vulnerable and disadvantaged. India stands by to support the cause being promulgated in this August gathering. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you, sir. You have rightly put spotlight on the pressing issues of ensuring access of affordable housing to the forefront of our discussions at the UN and other international fora, and mitigating the rural and urban gaps, leaving no one behind. Thank you. We have among us today Mr. Ryder, Director General, International Labour Organization. May I now request him to deliver his statement? DGILO, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Executive Director of UN Habitat, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by expressing my appreciation for the opportunity to contribute to this extremely important debate and to thank the Government of Bangladesh for its leadership, both internationally, through the convening of events such as this, but also by example in its national action, the Ashrayan program, which I think shows what we can do together. I want to declare at the outset, and do it in the strongest terms possible, the strong interest, and I would say responsibility, of the International Labour Organization to contribute to the new urban agenda, to the 2030 agenda, notably SDG 11.1, and of course to the attainment of access of safe and affordable housing for all and an ending of homelessness. The reason for this is really quite simple. In essence, people go to work in the first instance to secure food and shelter for themselves and for their families. And that means that when we see the prevalence of food insecurity and of homelessness that we see in the world today, we need to redouble our efforts together. And we know that the challenge is being compounded by the shocks that COVID has brought us, that climate change is continuing to bring to us, and conflict in the world is generating as well. From the perspective of the ILO, let me emphasize that where labor market outcomes are unsatisfactory or inadequate, this is inevitably going to have impact on access to safe and affordable housing for those who are unemployed, for those who work but still live in extreme poverty, and that is 1 of every 14 workers in the world. Informal work means informal settlements. Precarity at work means precarious status in the housing markets. These are not separate struggles, these are a common cause. And conversely, the absence of appropriate housing close to places where jobs are available is a constraint on labour mobility and positive labour market outcomes. 2 points, ladies and gentlemen. If we accept, and what I've just said is intended to make that proposition, that our challenges are common, then our solutions, the solutions that lie before us, also bring common benefits. And I will just explain that by very brief reference to 2 points. The type of construction that is needed to ensure access to safe and affordable housing for all can make an extraordinarily important contribution to the creation of decent work. Construction is labor intensive. If done right, it can combine the social, the economic, and the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. And allow me to say that when we talk about the construction of safe and adequate housing, we also need to keep in mind to extend the same considerations to the creation of safe workplaces. And lastly, I want to emphasize, and I want to do it strongly, the importance of social protection. If one thing COVID has told us, it is that a world in which more than half of the population, more than 4 billion people, have access to no social protection whatsoever, the loss of a job is very often likely to lead to the loss of a home. So we need to follow the Secretary General's lead. He launched a UN Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection last September with a view to extending social protection to all of those who don't have it. In so doing, we will be contributing importantly to the cause of safe and affordable housing for all. Ladies and gentlemen, if sustainable development begins at home, we must act to make sure that everybody has such a home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General Ayala, for your insightful and informative deliberation, and especially for putting to the fore the interlinkages between SDGs 8 and 11, and also for highlighting the critical importance of decent jobs and social protection for tackling the overlapping crisis of our time. Next, we have Ms. Maria Francesca Spatolisano, Assistant Secretary General, Department of Economic and Social Affairs in the UN. You have the floor, SG, please.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to take part on behalf of UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs in this high-level panel discussion on ensuring safe and affordable housing for all and achieving SDG Target 11.1. My praises, first of all, to the organizers of today's event, the government of Bangladesh and UN Habitat, for ensuring that these critical issues of adequate housing and ending homelessness are highlighted during this very important high-level week of the General Assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from all the speakers before me, the confluence of crises before us today is disrupting and even reversing progress on many SDGs. The impacts have been particularly severe for those living in poverty or in vulnerable situations, including those who lack adequate housing or are experiencing homelessness. And these numbers of these people are growing. We know, and it has been reiterated today, that ensuring safe and affordable housing for all is a necessary but a very complex task. it requires efforts across a wide group of policy actors, taking a whole of government and a whole of society approach, as Maimunah said. I will draw your attention to a very relevant UN resolution and its useful guidance, which was a sort of precursor for our work. Just months before the start of the pandemic, member states recognized this complexity when the 58th session of the Commission for Social Development adopted its resolution on affordable housing and social protection systems for all to address homelessness. And that was the first one of such a resolution that the United Nations adopted to address homelessness specifically. And in this resolution, as I say, a precursor, member states recognized the need for a multi-sectoral approach and integrated responses, addressing fiscal and economic policy, but also labor, housing, health, social protection, urban development, and environmental policies and population policies. So the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, which I have the honor to represent, continues to work on the how to do the follow-up to this guidance. And we are collaborating indeed with UN Habitat in a very good partnership to draft the Secretary General's report on inclusive policies and programs to address homelessness, including, and that's very relevant, in the aftermath of the coronavirus disease with its dramatic impact. And we will support member states in its implementation to achieve the SDG target and the whole 2030 agenda. So, ladies and gentlemen, as the world works to advance in its implementation of this target, we must learn from each other. The crafting of policies that effectively account for the interplay among such a breadth of factors requires not only that we share what has worked well, but that we uncover why it has worked. It also requires that we are honest about failed policies and that we explore these failures for lessons that can inform and strengthen our future efforts. And with this in mind, I look forward to this discussion, to the sharing by Bangladesh of its experience, as well the experience of all the participants, good practices, lessons learned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, SG Maria Francesca, and I cannot agree with you more on the importance of multi-stakeholder efforts to ensure safe and affordable housing for everyone, which is necessary, which is not only a necessary task, but also very complex. Excellencies, colleagues, will now show an audiovisual presentation which will highlight some of the success stories of Bangladesh to address the issue of homelessness, especially for those who live on the margins of the society.
Millions of people are still homeless across the world. Globally, most of them are urban people. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina initiated Solve the Crisis from root as urbanization is spreading rapidly in Bangladesh. She has taken a noble and unique initiative to ensure a home with land for homeless people. This is known as Ashrayan Project, Home for Landless Homeless. In 2021, Bangladesh celebrated Mujib 100, the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. Prime Minister made a declaration that is unprecedented in human history, saying that there will be no homeless and landless people in Bangladesh. She made this promise and implements it in the most densely populated country in the world by providing homes with the ownership of land.
নিজেরা একটু খোঁজ নেন যে আপনার এলাকায় কয়টা মানুষ গৃহহীন আছে, কয়টা মানুষ গৃহহারা আছে বা ভূমিহীন আছে, আপনারা একটু খুঁজে বের করেন।
She She has done it successfully with her courage and compassion for marginalized people. Under the direct supervision of the Prime Minister, 18,000 acres of unutilized lands have been used to provide housing for around 3.7 million homeless people, which costs $1,565 million. Each beneficiary got a 2-room brick-built semi-Mkaka disaster-resilient house of 400 square feet with a long veranda, kitchen, toilet, electricity connection, and drinking water free of cost. People are living here with all kinds of township facilities, including a school, playground, healthcare facilities, etc. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina introduces her brainchild initiative, My Village, My City, to reduce the gap between urban and rural areas. This unique project ensures the rights of home for the poor people of the country, which leads them to fulfill other fundamental rights like food, education, health, and dress. In 1972, just after independence, Father of the Nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, took the initiative to rehabilitate the landless, homeless, and distressed people in 1972. In 1996, daughter of Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina re-initiated the program, aiming for the inclusive development. She started this program, Astroyon, Home for Landless, Homeless, in 1997. The project had twofold aims. This area provides housing and makes these people economically self-reliant. Astroyon project is an exemplary endeavor toward inclusive development. People with unpredictable lives, such as the day laborers, beggars, poor fishermen, third genders, ethnic groups, leprosy patients, sweepers, people with disabilities, and widows, are now owners of home with lands. To ensure gender equality, the project has distributed the land equally to the spouses and has included beneficiaries from hilly regions, distant shores, and howers too. Besides, flat for sweepers community and slum dwellers are also built in different cities. These marginalized people were deprived of many things for 100 years. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, through her Astroyon project, includes those people in the mainstream, which is a unique example of social integration. By all these noble and people-friendly initiatives, like Astroyon project, is building a humanitarian Bangladesh. During the handover ceremony, when the head of the government connected with those people and give them the documents of land and home ownership, a heavenly environment creates on the earth.
আপনি আমার সোনার বাংলার পরশ পাথর আপনার ছোঁয়ায় আমার জীবনটাই পাল্টে গেছে মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী আপনাকে আমরা দূর থেকে নয় কাছ থেকে দেখতে চাই
একদম নিয়াসরা আমি আমার কোনো আশ্রয় ছিল না আমার মা বাবা কোনোদিন আশ্রয় আমারে দিতে পারে নাই
বিগত 20-22 বছর ধরে এর কাছে ওর কাছে হাত পেতে খেয়েছি মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী কেউ আমাদেরকে ঘর ভাড়া দিতে চায়নি মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী আমরা এখন নিজের ঘরে বসে ঈদ করতে পারবো এর চেয়ে খুশি আর কিছু হয় না
The project has facilitated training programs to empower the beneficiaries. They are now engaged in small economic activities, turning the house into a farm. They're cultivating new hopes with bigger dreams for themselves and the next generations. The Astroyon project is also working for the climate victims. The world's largest climate victim rehabilitation project, Kurush Kul Special Astroyon, was constructed in Cox's Bazar in 2019. It is a 139 multi-storied building project. Around 5,000 climate victim families were accommodated in it. As a whole, Sheikh Hasina's model for inclusive development has ensured dignified livelihood, women empowerment, skill development, reduction in climate vulnerability, and the presence of urban amenities in the villages. The project complies with 8 SDG targets, establishing equal rights of men and women in land ownership, building resilience to climate change-induced risks, increasing agricultural productivity, ensuring good health and well-being, ending discrimination against women and girls, access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene, bringing backward communities into mainstream, and combating effects of climate change have also been addressed in this project. The Ashrine project has ensured the dignity of the poor and ultra-poor, bringing them into the ladder of development, which is undoubtedly a landmark for the nation.
It's very emotional. Thank you, Honorable Prime Minister. Excellencies, colleagues, we have a rich panel of experts today to delve into the issues more deeply. I wholeheartedly thank them for their participation at this event. Just a few ground rules before we start the panel discussion. The panelists who are present at the room today will speak from the podium. The panelists who have joined virtually may please unmute themselves and speak when they're given the floor, and the time limit for each panelist will be 4 to 5 minutes. I now give the floor to our first panelist, Mr. Muhammad Tafazzal Hussein Mia, Senior Secretary, Prime Minister's Office. You have the floor, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and good morning to you all. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, Excellencies, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. You all know that homeless is an acute reality for all of us, and the number of shelterless people is constantly changing over the world. It's not a sudden phenomenon as you all have described, rather it is an accumulation of constant deprivation, poverty, unjust planning, and natural disasters. Bangladesh, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, converts housing to an inclusive and sustainable model and has addressed the issue of homelessness in a very, very different perspective. You know, Asrayon, Bangla word that stands for shelter, is linked up with need-based training, skill development, microfinancing, healthcare, sanitation, safe drinking water, and electricity. And the ultimate point of convergence is not only to give a house, but ensuring economic self-reliance through increased earning, empowerment of women, and human resource development. I would rather focus on some of the issues that every landless and homeless family is given, as our Honorable Prime Minister has said, that 2 decimals of land and a brick-built house of 2 rooms with veranda, kitchen, and hygienic toilet facilities. This housing facility is simultaneously urban and rural focused, including cities, towns, coastal areas, chor, and hilly areas also. Every rehabilitated family is provided with need-based training. Women and children, earlier prone to various infectious and waterborne diseases, are now connected to nearby community clinics and having regular primary health care, immunization, reproductive and maternal health services. So this is the uniqueness of Asrayon. That is, it is not only a shelter program, it includes the other areas of human life. A secured and stable housing ensures almost 100% access to compulsory primary education in Bangladesh. Women and children are now able to protect themselves from the adverse and hostile environment because of cluster housing, where all the social benefit programs are in place, and frequently the government officials visit the sites and supports the beneficiaries. You know, as it is mentioned, the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, he took the very first move to rehabilitate the landless and the underprivileged. And it is an extraordinary declaration by our Honourable Prime Minister during the Mujib Barsho or the Mujib year that not a single person in the country will remain homeless in Mujib year. So that promotes accelerated speed to the implementation of the program. And I would rather focus on it is a state-sponsored housing facilities, which is totally free of cost. It's neither subsidized, it is nor rent-based. It is free of cost totally. So if many issues have been discussed by our by different corners, but if we look into ASEAN from the global perspective or from a different global lens, what we would say that it's only one intervention that delivers multiple results. Suppose if we go for UN SDGs 11.1, but I would rather say that many other interventions have been there, and we have made it successful under our Prime Minister's leadership. Under this project, whenever we talk about the ownership of land and house provided in the joint names of the husband and wife with accessible green and public space, meaning ownership and control of economic resources by both husband and wife, which is mentioned in SDG Target 1.4. If we look into SDG Target 1.5, reducing the risk of those affected and distressed by climate extreme events, Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina implements the largest ever refugee rehabilitation project of 139 multi-storied buildings in a single location for the climate victims. It is mentioned that it is not only the transgenders or the mining workers or the leprosy patients, the poor, elderly, widows, distressed women. So by involving them, we could eliminate the discrimination and ensure the representation of the underprivileged, which is enhanced through the social inclusion, and that is mentioned in SDG Target 10.2. So what I would rather say, the project ensures access to adequate and equitable hygienic lifestyle. This is very important in every developing society. And water use efficiency has increased as in the SDG Target 6.2. So every household gets a toilet attached and a tube oil or a treated surface water we are providing them, and free electricity connection is provided to the houses. So what I would rather say that if we look into the impact of housing or the experience of Bangladesh or the Bangladesh context, I would rather say what changes it has made. It is, we have our empirical evidences. We have our survey. It shows that free of cost housing has a ripple effects to an entire community, to an entire society. The economic opportunity, if we talk about, is that it ends the cycle of intergenerational poverty through spending more on goods and services, rather cutting our cost from house rent and other areas. So spending more on goods and services by the women, that is the game changer of the of developing a human spirit. So if you talk about the decent housing, we have found that this has brought stability in child's physical and mental development and education. And whenever we are talking about ownership of land, so our experience is that home ownership promotes self-employment. In everywhere where we have given our houses, we have found these people are self-employed. This has promoted job creation through small enterprises, through businesses, and household farming. Even at some cases, we have found very wonderful example of wealth creation. It means they have invested money and they have their growth also. So the ownership of land of house by women certainly reduces domestic violence. This is a very good example. So as our UN, from the UN Habitat Executive Director told, the conversion of a house to a home, I would rather say that we have already converted our houses to homes. Yeah. And we call it Sheikh Hasina model for inclusive development that turns a house to a home by multiple social and economic interventions and promoting unique safety, self-esteem, and peace. And when there is in a family, there is safety, self-esteem, and peace, it converts a house to a home. So with this, I would rather say that thus Australian is a sustainable human settlement planning with a unique approach to poverty alleviation, economic self-reliance, empowerment of women, social and economic growth, and mainstreaming the underprivileged community. And what we all wish that this project, all the projects of housing that would realize our collective ambitions and revitalize our global partnership for sustainable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Senior Secretary, for highlighting on the progress that Bangladesh has made and has been making in ensuring safe and affordable houses for all, and some of the innovative approaches and initiatives that Bangladesh can share for the benefits of other countries in the comparable situation. I'd now like to give the floor to Ms. Leilana Farah, former UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Housing and Global Director, the SHIFT. She's joining us virtually. Can she be put on the screen, please? Yes. Ms. Farah, I have some specific questions for you. What are the root causes of homelessness and the challenges in addressing the crisis at global, national, and local levels? And how to raise societal awareness as well as combat discrimination and stereotypes against people who experiences homelessness? You may like to shed some light on this, among others. You have the floor, Ms. Farah.
Thank you, Chair. Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants, it is an honor to be here, even if remotely. There is, in fact, an overarching cause of homelessness, and it may be a difficult one for some of you to hear. But in my estimation, a central cause of global homelessness is that most states fail to fully implement the human right to housing for this population. The human right to housing requires states and all orders of government to ensure that everyone has access to adequate, secure housing, regardless of any personal characteristics that might make it difficult for them to maintain housing. Homelessness is a prima facie violation of the right to housing under international human rights law and requires states to take immediate and priority action to address it. This means not only trying to house those who are homeless, but also reviewing all of the laws and policies that contribute to making homelessness. Let me provide you with a quick overview of some of the legislative and policy decisions taken by states that actively contribute to homelessness. Now, some of these may have been mentioned by my colleagues. For example, the decision to forcibly evict informal settlements and homeless encampments, as seen in the global north, for example. The upgrading of informal settlements that results in displacement. Weak tenant protections in law that allow tenants to be easily evicted and evicted into homelessness. The failure to adequately mitigate against climate-related disasters and the failure to control CO2 emissions in keeping with international commitments. The preferential tax treatment provided to institutional investors like private equity funds, real estate investment trusts, and pension funds, who are really just acting as speculators, purchasing homes to extract wealth and pushing up the cost of housing, making housing unaffordable and forcing tenants out. The takeover of long-term housing by short-term housing platforms like Airbnb. The selling off of public lands to private developers who build luxury instead of building to meet need. What I suppose is most difficult about this, besides the dire living conditions for people in homelessness, is the double jeopardy they experience. States create homelessness and then often criminalize, penalize, imprison people for their homelessness. I have seen this in countries far and wide. In the global north, where I have met people compelled to live in parks and under highways or in their cars, only to be persistently surveyed and harassed, policed and ticketed and criminalized and evicted from where they're staying, but provided nowhere else to go. Even here in Canada, where I sit. In the global south, I have seen informal settlements brutally evicted and people living by railway tracks or under bridges, rounded up by police and even imprisoned for nothing other than their poverty and homelessness. After having been special rapporteur within the UN human rights system for 6 years, I suppose what surprises me most is that homelessness has not really been embraced by member states as the pressing human rights crisis that it is. And that makes the focus of today's conversation so very important. Let's not forget, homelessness is a fast track to preventable, premature morbidity and mortality. It is an affront to the right to security of person and to life itself, cornerstones of human rights. Just like climate change, COVID-19, war and conflict, homelessness is a matter of life and death. But it can be addressed. As UN rapporteur, I produced guidelines for the implementation of the right to housing. My predecessors produced guidelines on secure tenure and on development-based displacement. SDG Target 11.1 requires states to end global homelessness. The only way to do this is to end the discriminatory treatment of homeless people by implementing the right to adequate housing on an urgent basis. The distinguished Prime Minister from Bangladesh has laid this out, how this is possible. She's laid this out very clearly through her words, but more importantly, through practice. I look forward to working with all of you to end global homelessness by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Farah, for bringing into discussion the human rights perspective of homelessness. Thank you. Our next panelist is Ms. Julia Wagner, Program Manager, Institute of Global Homelessness. Yes, please come to the podium. And Julia, may you please reflect your views on how to develop people-centered, housing-led, preventive, holistic, and multi-sectoral, as well as evidence-based strategies to address homelessness in the long term, and how to improve coordinated efforts to effectively collect, analyze, and implement data on homelessness. You may like to shed some light on that in your discussions. Floor is yours, Julia.
Thank you. Good morning, Excellencies, Ministers, distinguished guests, and I want to thank the conveners, the government of Bangladesh, and UN Habitat for having this important event. The Institute of Global Homelessness works in deep partnership with UN Habitat, with local and national governments, people of lived experience, researchers at academic institutions, and homeless practitioners working on the ground to accelerate progress to end homelessness. IGH has worked with experts on setting a clear global definition of homelessness through the IGH framework. The definition is included in the description of the 2021 UN General Assembly resolution, including people living on the streets, in open spaces or in buildings not intended for human habitation, people living in temporary shelter, and may include people living in severely inadequate accommodation without security of tenure and access to basic services. Currently, definitions of homelessness vary greatly by country, and homeless data is incomplete. Without a comparable definition of homelessness and measurement, it is extremely difficult to know how many people experience homelessness in cities and countries worldwide, and to coordinate action on homelessness. We are working with our partners, UN-Habitat and member states, to improve measurement and to standardize global definition of homelessness. The Institute of Global Homelessness has worked with global cities across 6 continents through our Vanguard program, and these cities and countries have defined homelessness, set ambitious goals, and worked to collaborate and change their systems in order to reduce homelessness. We had a formal evaluation of our program investigating what works to end homelessness across contexts. The research found that political will, coordination, raising the ambition that homelessness can be ended are key to progress. For example, in Chile and Uruguay, our partners in the national government have agreed to ambitious goals to reduce homelessness, and we have seen reductions across cities and countries that we work with through this program. As Madame Executive Director said, and all of government and all of civil society response must be there to end homelessness. How we have seen this work in cities and countries is through multi-sector collaboration, where social services, housing, health, police, education, people of lived experience, youth, all act together to end homelessness. Implementing solutions-focused programs that work, including prevention programs, assertive street outreach, to work with people on the street and move them into housing, and housing programs that match the needs and choice of the client, moving away from emergency accommodation and providing appropriate services for women, children, older people, and other vulnerable groups, as well as culturally sensitive responses to Indigenous people and other groups affected by racial and associated forms of prejudice are essential. In Chile, Scotland, England, USA, Canada, and many other countries, communities are working to expand housing options with targeted approaches, including housing first, providing people with a permanent home, along with case management and supportive services. One of the best ways to end homelessness is to prevent it before it occurs, working to improve affordable housing, setting new policies on housing, including tenant protections, creating interventions at hospitals and prisons to stop discharge into homelessness. Finally, collecting accurate, actionable, and inclusive data is essential to any approach. Disaggregated data provides a roadmap on the makeup of a population experiencing homelessness or housing security, with details on geography, health, causes and drivers of homelessness, and allows for proper monitoring of outcomes over time. We recommend regular enumeration of homelessness with a robust methodology. Data systems must be designed in a way that enables multiple actors to collaborate with each other and to provide health and other integrated data. For data, people of lived experience should be involved in every level of the collection process, working as enumerators to do surveys, participating in qualitative focus groups or interviews, conducting evaluations, working as project or program employees, and serving as members of steering committees or board members. Data is much more accurate and responses reflect programs and the actual results of programs when people of lived experience are involved. Investment in data has no impact without action. With accurate data and the international evidence base, communities create specialized responses for housing and services. I want to extend my congratulations to the government of Bangladesh for their housing model. And as we have seen as the Institute of Global Homelessness, this is what we need to end homelessness globally, is political will and action. We must work together, but ending homelessness is possible. And I believe we can all do it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Julia Wagner, for traveling all the way from Chicago to New York to speak at this event and also to share your experience in the fields of the international humanitarian, health, education, and homelessness. The next panelist is Ms. Jessica Katz, Chief Housing Officer, Mayor's Office, New York City. She's joining us virtually.
Good morning, everyone.
Yes, Miss Jessica, I have two specific questions for you. What are the complementary roles of the national and local government, as well as the private sectors, in addressing homelessness, and how to address the mismatch between availability to housing and growing demand accelerated by an increasing population in the urban areas and the shortage of affordable housing? You have the floor, Jessica.
Thank you so much, sir. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ministers from around the world, and other distinguished guests. I'm honored to be here today to discuss all the incredible progress that is being made across the globe, as well as to strategize about our shared struggles. My apologies that I cannot be there with you in person, and I hope you'll have me back to continue this discussion. Welcome to New York City. On behalf of Mayor Adams, my name is Jessica Katz, and I'm the Chief Housing Officer for the City of New York. New York City has a variety of tools that we use to help build more housing. We have tax tools, regulatory reforms, financing, enforcement of our building codes, and direct subsidies. Several months ago, we released our housing blueprint called Housing Our Neighbors, which contains a wide variety of commitments and policy proposals that will help New York City combat our housing and homelessness crisis. And at the root of this blueprint is one simple idea. Homelessness is a housing issue. That may sound like an obvious statement, like common sense even, but for a very long time, we have stigmatized homelessness and attempted to address it in a way that frames the problem as a human failing or a personal pathology. This lens is tempting because it allows us to assume that homeless New Yorkers lack a home because of their own poor decisions, but it asks the social services sector to provide what no social service can ever accomplish: put a roof over someone's head. Homelessness is a housing issue, and the solution will lie in addressing our city's housing crisis. I also want to talk about climate change. When I was growing up, I was taught in school to worry about climate change because we wanted to leave a better world for future generations. That view seems so optimistic in hindsight. New York City has learned the hard way over and over again that climate change is here today. Next month, we will mark the 10-year anniversary of Superstorm Sandy, and that storm left thousands of New Yorkers homeless. And we have seen, since that storm, we have seen that what we used to think of as a 100-year storm seems to hit our shores each and every year. We have made progress, though. We are working hard towards the legalization and increased safety of basement apartments, which are used by many in the informal housing market here in New York City, and which we must protect against the vagaries of climate change. Last year alone, we did a full renovation of 6,000 of our public housing units that represent our most deeply affordable housing stock. We are making full use of every available resource to build new affordable housing, thousands of apartments each year. And we are working hard to track and expedite all of the pathways we have to help house New Yorkers as quickly as possible. Despite our commitment, though, despite our belief in a robust housing strategy for our city, and despite the thousands of new apartments we have created for low-income and homeless New Yorkers, I'll admit that we are still struggling. We have more than 50,000 homeless people here in New York City. Housing is a human right, we say, and we believe it. But in truth, our process for building housing, our lack of progress towards ending homelessness, makes me worry at times that we have a long way to go, that housing as a human right is a little more than a slogan. So that's why it's inspiring here to hear the stories from around the world today. And it gives me some hope that we can work together to finally be able to truly say that housing is indeed a human right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jessica Katz, for sharing the good practices the New York City has to address the issue of homelessness. Next on our list is Ms. Mariangela Paralancourt, Chief Strategic Engagement and Policy Integration Branch at United Nations, UN-DESA, FGO. Mariangela, could you please come to the podium? And I have two questions for you. May you please reflect on how to measure effectiveness of policy frameworks and ensure that social protection policies and programs help prevent people from falling into homelessness, and how to address challenges faced by specific communities experiencing homelessness. You have the floor, Mariangela.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much to the government of Bangladesh and to Habitat for organizing this. It is an honor for me to be here representing the Financing for Sustainable Development Office and bringing a little bit us back to the issue of social protection. As ILO's guide spoke before, we have 4 billion people that do not have any access to social protection, and social protection is crucial. We having an infrastructure for social protection floors with universal coverage, as we committed governments in the world committing to in the 2030s agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, would really guarantee a basic level of security that will help people from falling into homelessness. Yet, there are not social protections in all countries, and even where they are, like in the city of New York, the issue is still out of hand. Despite progress, social protection coverage remains limited. In 2020, only 46% of the global population had access to at least one social protection benefit, including the 2 billion informal workers in the informal economy. The largest coverage gaps are in unemployment benefits, when only 18.6% of unemployed persons had access to a benefit in 2020 or in the recent years. The benefits for children are very low. Only 26.4% of children have access to any social protection. Social assistance for the vulnerable is also very low, less than 30%. And even if you're employed, you can also lose your job and after an injury, and only 35.4% have employment injury benefits. And this is really also in gender differences. Only 44% of women with newborns worldwide receive a cash maternity benefit. So populations are always at the verge of homelessness. And why is social protection so difficult? Because social protection is expensive, and because political will is also difficult. Commendable programs like those that we have heard before are examples to follow. But we still have not enough resources spent in protecting the populations. While the world spent on average 13% of its GDP on social protection, poorer countries with limited resources spent obviously much less. And so the financial gaps are very big, and the pandemic clearly increased the financial gap for social protection at least 30%. How do you fund social protection is crucial. In countries that can do it, social security contributions are the most important financing source for that, for those that exist and from which we can learn from. Other source is general government revenue, obviously. And the UN has, the Secretary General and the UN has always said that universal social protection can really help. Targeted programs for housing are crucial, but if we don't consider the whole of government, the whole of population, and in a universal way, we are going to be less prepared to handle crises like COVID, climate change, and others. Social protection can also really help address some of the sources of homelessness and of these informality, for example. Social protection systems can be designed in a way that they really provide incentives for business formalization and a reduction in tax avoidance and evasion. Important political and legal reforms and administrative reforms can really support and cement the right to social security and the right to housing also, while also incentivizing the formalization of informal enterprises and provided more support to individuals that may even not have access to identity, an identity card that may allow them to have access to social protection. So In the outcome document of the 2022 ECOSOC Financial for Development Forum, member states committed to expand investment in social protection floors as percentage of national budgets. They also committed to extend social protection for all, especially sensitive and gender responsive social protection, including workers in the informal and emerging sectors of the economy, and those who intend to reintegrate into the workforce. I was going to mention the Global Accelerator. There will be an event on Friday that really will bring what has happened over the past year in this effort to promote policy coherence on issues related to employment, formalization, social protection, including health and care work, youth, gender, and developing a finance and governance structure for these efforts. In terms of one of the questions, in terms of how to reach different communities, it's, as my previous predecessor just mentioned, the collection and availability of timely and disaggregated data is essential for monitoring and evaluating social protection policies and programs. In the outcome document, again, of the 2022 ECOSOC Financing for Development Forum, member states also committed to improve monitoring of social protection coverage, disaggregated by sex, age, disability, and other characteristics relevant in national context. It is really crucial to connect social protection information systems with other public information systems, such as vital registration systems and tax administration databases that can contribute to ensure inclusion and preventing fraud. These are some of the thoughts that I wanted to bring you from the perspective of financing for development. Thank you so much for the honor to be here.
Thank you, Mariangela, for bringing to discussion the issues of financial gap, resource constraints, and also the importance of political and legal reform in ensuring social protection and addressing the homelessness. I would now invite Ms. Natalia Winder-Rossi, Director, Social Policy and Social Protection Program, UNICEF. She is also participating in the event virtually. Ms. Rossi, poverty and social exclusions are key drivers of children in urban settings living in adequate and unsafe housing or experiencing homelessness. What is UNICEF's approach in ensuring children's right to adequate housing and addressing poverty and exclusion in urban settings? You have the floor, Ms. Natalia.
Good morning, colleagues. Thanks very much. Excellencies, distinguished participants, really many thanks for the opportunity to participate in this critical and timely panel. And thanks to the government of Bangladesh and UN Habitat for hosting this meeting and for their leadership on this critical agenda. Let me share some perspectives from our view, from UNICEF, given that we are in a very critical moment for our common agenda and priorities. As we all know, after nearly a quarter century of steady global declines, child poverty is on the rise. We have estimated that we have 100 million additional children that are now living in multidimensional poverty as a result of the compounding impacts of the climate crisis, conflict, and COVID-19. And this is, of course, on top of the alarming impacts in terms of learning poverty, malnutrition, and mental health. And I think it's important to be clear that child poverty is not only confined to low-income countries. In fact, the majority of vulnerable children live in middle-income countries due to income inequality and policy gaps. And this is concerning not only when we see the aggregate numbers, but also as we know that the profiles of children and families experiencing poverty has changed, including an exponential increase in the number of children and families living in urban areas and in informal settlements that are experiencing poverty, many for the first time. And indeed, as you mentioned, poverty, the lack of social cohesion, exposure to multiple risks, as well as structural discrimination and inclusion are some of the drivers for children in urban settings to be living without any adequate support, including without access to adequate and safe housing. And as we've been putting forth in many of our joint analysis, children access to adequate housing and growing in a safe and productive environment are fundamental for their survival, development, and protection. We know that the overall well-being, from their cognitive development to health and education, is significantly impacted by the quality of their housing. And I think this calls us to accelerate our joint actions for improving children's and families' access to social services, and of course, to work together to make sure that children have the right to an adequate standard of living. And this commitment has to include, of course, important efforts in terms of infrastructure, but also access to child-friendly spaces, allowing children to thrive, as highlighted by our joint brief with UN Habitat, Children, Cities, and Housing. So what is UNICEF approach in this context? This year, we launched our new strategic plan, which revamps our commitment to eliminate child poverty, contributing to a multi-sector and holistic approach that really aims to tackle the drivers of poverty and exclusion. And within that commitment, we've committed also to revamp our approach and to address territorial disparities, including in urban areas and slums. So key elements that we're putting forth. First and foremost, making sure that children living in poverty, their needs and vulnerabilities are visible. This means supporting national and local governments to systematically monitor, measure, and report on their progress around child poverty. We know that facilitating better data and evidence generation at national, but also at local levels, definitely help us to understand those critical territorial disparities, including inter-urban disparities, and therefore program better. The provision of this reliable evidence is critical for decision making, and also to understand what are the best ways to address the needs and priorities, including existing housing conditions and many of the social and environmental risks and hazards that children and families are exposed to. Secondly, we're also supporting what we call child-responsive urban planning and governance, and the development of specific programs and policies that improve children and urban citizens' lives and increase their chances to development and prosperity. This includes having a specific attention to ensuring that urban plans have adequate budgets that enable their effective implementation. Equally key, strengthening the voice and agency of children and adolescents, and empowering also their caregivers to effectively participate and shape pathways out of poverty based on local solutions and commitments. And finally, enhancing the critical capacity of local authorities to better coordinate and expand access to and quality of basic social services, with a particular focus, of course, of those that are most marginalized and have low resource settings within countries. Just to give some examples, in Indonesia, a situation analysis on adolescent participation and civic engagement highlighted some of the experience of the urban poor in accessing basic services, providing a roadmap of concrete actions for every child and youth in Indonesian cities for policymakers and partners to take on. Our commitment to ending poverty is also aligned with our lead role and field presence in scaling up social protection systems as a critical strategy to accelerate progress around SDG 1 and 10. And of course, as put forth by the previous speakers, including DD Ryder, the importance of following the call of our Secretary General in really making sure that we take advantage of the momentum and the focus on social protection and really scale up their coverage and impact across all contexts, and making sure that we have the appropriate expansion and appropriate scale, including expansion to children and families. And also, I think another big element of our work is enhancing the capacity of local governments and actors on budgeting, costing, planning, and financing, as highlighted by our joint work developed with UN Habitat. I believe that through our strategic partnerships with national and local governments, UN agencies, civil society, the private sector, and of course the community, we can effectively streamline global commitments to adequately reduce poverty and ensure access to basic social services, including very specifically the access to safe and affordable housing for all. We should ensure that good examples, which are presented today throughout this panel, become the norm, not the exception. And we're of course happy to be part of this process, developing a common narrative on the importance of inclusive policies and programs to support the effective implementation. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Natalia Winters-Rossi, for highlighting on the critical issues of the multidimensional challenges faced by homeless children and the need for good urban planning for addressing this. Excellencies, colleagues, With this, we come to the end of the panel discussions. We now open the floor for your reflections, interventions. Please be reminded that we are running out of time. So if you'd like to make remarks or comments, please make it as brief as possible, preferably within 1 or 2 minutes. And the colleagues who are in the room, please indicate your intention to take the floor by raising your hand. Our volunteers will provide you a microphone to speak when given floor. Please introduce yourself. We have, I think we have there.
Does it work? Yes.
Yes.
Good morning, Prime Minister, Executive Director. Thank you very much for organizing this very important session. My name is Axel de la Maisonneuve. I work for the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. And to start with, I would like to congratulate you for putting forward the importance of sustainable housing. And it's appeared clearly through the discussions this morning how important all the ramifications of SDG 11.1, how important all these ramifications are for all the SDGs. The European Union is in full support of the priority on sustainable urban development. We contribute to the implementation of the new urban agenda. The EU over the last 10 years has funded this area up to 111 billion euros. Only the EU, not counting the EU member states, not counting multilateral and financial and regional financial institutions. And one area that is very important that we work upon at the moment, talking about financial institutions, is innovative financing, also in the area of housing through guarantees, for example. We want to congratulate Bangladesh for its policy making, and especially for the Ashrayan program. A lot has been said this morning about the success and the promises of this program. One of the areas, one of the angles of the program that we see as particularly promising is climate resilience. And we noticed that this housing program has led to constructions conceived as mini cyclone shelters. And in these times of climate change, this is certainly very, very important. We note that the BRAC microfinance institution has established that 3,770 such mini cyclone shelters have been built as of 2020, and that during disasters, 12,000 infrastructures are used as shelters. Definitely, this is a very valuable experience in these times of climate crisis, from which I guess many countries developed and developing can learn. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. And ma'am, I think you want to take the floor. Yes, briefly, please.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, I represent the permanent mission of Poland. I wanted to fully support the intervention by the EU delegation and also add some comments in my national capacity. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this meeting and keeping the urban issues very high in the agenda of the permanent missions here in New York. As a host country of the 11th session of the World Urban Forum held in Katowice this year. In June, we very much praised the achievements of Bangladesh in addressing homelessness in the last 2 decades. The issue of housing and ending poverty requires due attention. And as the panel today said, this is a question of human dignity. Drawing from Poland's national experience, we're aware that there are many issues and many root causes, including low supply of affordable housing and others. In Poland, there's a homelessness strategy in place, but in this session, I wanted also to acknowledge the role of civil society organizations in keeping the homeless people off the work and providing emergency support. In recent months, the Polish society and government have also done their best in housing the Ukrainian refugees fleeing Russian invasion. We look forward to continuing the cooperation and conversation by exchange of best practices as today and international collaboration. And Poland and the European Union is actively engaged in supporting new urban agenda and addressing these critical issues. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for your remarks. Distinguished participants, that I'm sorry that we have to close this segment at this moment because we are really running out of time. The online. Okay, we have a very serious request from a participant online. If he or she can make it just in 1 minute, we would deeply appreciate. I think it's Green India online. I believe we're experiencing some technical difficulties in connecting him. Thank you. Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, we have come to the end of this event. And before I invite Mr. Christopher Williams, Director, UN Habitat, to make some brief concluding remarks, may I also humbly request Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh if she kindly wishes to make some remarks. Honorable Prime Minister.
I just want to thank you everybody for your comments, and also we also get some new ideas. We have been doing our own way, but now through all the honorable speakers' comments, we get some ideas also, so we can share with each other. But we must work together to ensure that no one left behind. Each and every family should get a home, house, home, and livelihood. That it is especially for the children and for the next generation, very important. So thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, and my sincere apology once again to those participants who wanted to take floor and make their remarks. We have with us Mr. Christopher Williams, Director, UN Habitat. Christopher, if you could come to the podium and to make some concluding remarks and also to identify some key takeaways of today's discussion. The floor is yours, Christopher.
Thank you very much. And Your Excellency, Madam Prime Minister, thanks so much for convening this, and your leadership on this issue is noted. Distinguished delegates, colleagues from the UN system, friends, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much. I just want to make some concluding remarks, some synthesis of what we've heard today. And I think the central message here is that the ideas that are in this room are clearly the ingredients for future action. The diversity of interventions that we heard is really, I think, a good reflection of the wide range of elements that are necessary to address homelessness and really make a dent in affordable and accessible homes. I would like to begin by emphasizing my appreciation for Your Excellency, Prime Minister. I feel that your grasp of these issues is very encouraging. I had the honor of meeting with you yesterday with our Executive Director, and just listening to you, it's very clear that this is not something that's distant or intellectual or policy. It's something you're doing. It's something you feel, and you're very committed to it. And I think that sends a very strong signal to all of us. The central approach that I see in what's happening with Bangladesh is that you're looking at housing as an anchor. You get housing right, you can do many other things. It's very comprehensive, your approach, and I think we have a lot to learn from the Bangladesh experience. From Malawi, I think we heard very clearly that, and from his work with G77, the Doha Action Plan, their commitment to really tackle the question of informality informal settlements and slums, for them to align themselves with the AU Declaration of Action Plan for 2063 to reduce from 60% of informality to 10% is an extremely bold initiative for the continent. And we should keep track of that initiative and how they're going about it and the lessons learned. Executive Director, very nice to hear from your interventions, of course, linking the concepts of shelter, housing, and homelessness, and looking specifically at the implications of climate and the pandemics. The statistic of 37% of construction industry contributing to climate emissions and greenhouse, that means that we have to be thinking about, as we address homelessness, what kind of housing are we producing? What kind of carbon footprint? What kind of green emission is it going to have? And how can we make sure that we don't, in the interest of ending homelessness, create a deeper problem with climate? In the example from India with the affordable rental housing sub-scheme of their overall housing scheme, I think is extremely important. And to the Prime Minister's message, it's very much on leaving no one behind. They're targeting particular populations and making sure that rental income is a strategy, one of the strategies for addressing their housing needs. ILO, I'm sorry that Director General has left us today. I'm sorry he's leaving in general. I think many of us have worked closely with him. We've appreciated his work with leading ILO. He will be a great loss, but we certainly will try to drive on his work. The concepts of the proximity of work and home, I think, are really seminal and often overlooked in this discussion. Often people are desperate for housing. They're going to be close to their work. That is an extreme limitation on labor opportunities. It reduces labor mobility. I think his concept of a loss of job is a loss of a home. Linking SDG 8 with SDG 11 is something all of us in both the labor movements and looking at employment issues and those that are looking at homelessness should be thinking much more about. And of course, his emphasis with others on the work on the accelerator with urban income jobs and as well as social protection is noted, and we're all working together on that one. DESA, thanks so much, Assistant Secretary General, for reminding us that the first precedent on this was really an ECOSOC resolution, which gave birth to and inspired a lot of work between multiple agencies and member states to encourage in the 76th session a General Assembly resolution, which I think is in the third committee, a very good mechanism for us to move forward on this issue with homelessness with the Secretary General's report. Lalani Farah, as always, terrific to hear your reinforcement and clear articulation of the human right to housing and really states' requirements, the requirements of states that they've already signed up to look at legal instruments to ensure that there isn't homelessness and the lack of those efforts by member states and to hold member states accountable to that. The sort of double jeopardy concept of the absence of good state regulatory environment is leading to homelessness. It's creating homelessness, and then the homeless are criminalized. So it's the state has got a double attack on homelessness that has to be corrected, and a rights-based approach is clearly something we have to uphold. Julia Wagner from Institute of Global Homelessness, thanks so much for being here. She helps us she reminds us that we don't have a working definition of homelessness. We use it in different ways in different places, which is okay for individual governments. But when we want to look at this at the global level, we need to be clear about what we're measuring. That can inform policy and action. Thank you for your work on that. Jessica Katz from the city of New York, I found that to be a very honest and humble acknowledgement of the challenge of homelessness in New York City. We who work and live here realize that challenge. We see it every day. And we know that the city is committed to ending homelessness and looking at the various instruments, tax, building codes, as well as subsidies to try to address this. But I think her central message was homelessness is a housing issue. Yes, it's multifaceted, but if we don't get the housing piece right, we're not going to end homelessness. Our colleagues also from DESA on the finance piece, thank you very much for joining us, reinforcing really the question of the absence of finance for affordable housing and more broadly social protections, particularly in least developed countries. Natalie, thank you so much for joining online from UNICEF. Clearly, urban child poverty is something that we look to UNICEF to tackle and of course collaborate with in multiple ways, basically look at child protection from the angle of homelessness and its impact. 100 million children living in poverty is really something that we should zero in on as an aspect of homelessness. I think these are all really important ingredients, as I said, to tackling homelessness and looking more broadly. And I I just want to thank the government of Bangladesh, as well as the participants here and all those that collaborated in this initiative, and extremely well coordinated by these gentlemen behind us, an enormous amount of tireless hours. I think we give them a round of applause. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Christopher, for your closing remarks and for offering us such a good summary of the discussions today. Honorable ministers, excellencies, colleagues, and dear participants, we have had a rich discussion today. We have heard from governments, the UN colleagues, and civil society partners. We will identify the key ideas and share those with you all, or with all of you. It should be our shared good to address the issue of homelessness in a comprehensive manner. Before I end, I would like to thank Honorable Prime Minister of Bangladesh to make it her life mission to leave no Bangladeshi homeless. And we are ready to share our experiences with others for mutual benefit. I would also like to thank the UN Habitat, Madam Maimunah, the co-chairs of the Group of Friends on UN Habitat and Sustainable Housing, and other partners for all their support to make this event a success. I thank you once again for participating in this event. I wish you a very good day. I wish you all a very good day, and the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much.